Good morning. Well, that was quite a story. So in our gospel today, we meet two of the more colorful, lurid, problematic characters in the gospel, Herod and his wife Herodias. And as this story opens, Jesus' fame has started to spread across the countryside as he preaches and teaches and heals. And now, his disciples have started doing it too. This is very exciting news, and the people are starting to speculate. Who is this holy man? Is he Elijah? Is he one of the prophets of old? But when Herod hears about it, he knows who this is. John the Baptizer, whom I beheaded, has been raised, he says. And we are plunged into a flashback to John the Baptist's unjust, grisly murder. This horrible death and Herod's colorful family may be why this story has such a grip on literary and popular culture. You can find versions of these characters all over the place. The vacillating, weak king, the wicked, conniving queen, the righteous holy man, the beautiful, immoral young seductress, and the crowd of bystanders. I have to say, reading about them was mesmerizing and not in a good way. And then, as I continued my research and to prepare to preach today, I ran into a surprise. My mental image of Herodias' daughter, and indeed this whole scene, comes right out of Franco Zeffirelli's Jesus of Nazareth miniseries. Maybe some of you have seen this. She's beautiful, she's confident, and she's extremely seductive. And she's very much in league with her mother as far as getting rid of John the Baptist was concerned. And no, I didn't actually remember all this. It's on YouTube. You can watch it. So you can imagine my surprise when I learned that the Bible uses the word choratio to describe this young woman, whether her name is Salome or Herodias. And that word was familiar to me. I'd heard it recently, but I couldn't quite remember when until I realized we heard that same week 2 weeks ago. It's used to describe Jairus' little daughter, the one that Jesus heals. And it's translated as a young girl, barely out of childhood, maybe only just approaching marriageable age. So maybe the dance wasn't that seductive. Maybe it was just a lovely little children's dance. And what did that do to my reading of the story and actually the reading that's been handed down over the generations? Well, when I thought about it, I got even angrier at her mother. It's one thing to conspire with a young adult who is in agreement with you, though that's kind of horrible. But it's so much worse to involve a child and make her an accomplice and accessory to murder. And honestly, this is exactly the behavior we might expect from a wicked queen. Think of Snow White's mother, or Lady Tremaine, or anyone else, wicked queen. Especially since she had this huge grudge against John, but all he was urging Herod to do was get a divorce. It's not like she hadn't been divorced already. And this is taken as even more evidence of Herodias' basic wickedness. In some of the commentaries, it is suggested that she wanted to hang on to the status and power and role of queenship so much she was willing to do whatever it took, including murder. And that may be true. But there's a little more to the story, as there always is. So yes, if Herod divorced Herodias, she would no longer be queen, and she would no longer have him as a husband. What would happen next? Well, in her society at that time, she would take her children and go home to her own family. Except that for Herodias, her family is actually his family. Herod was her uncle. Did I mention that this family was colorful? So if she can find a male family member to take her in and support her and provide her with protection, she and her children will be fine. But if she can't, if no one in her family is willing to step up for her and she doesn't have anyone to turn to, she is at risk from all the men at the court. You can use your imagination for what that means. And not only is she at risk, so are her children. So her hatred of John is rooted in fear, but it's at least partially realistic fear. It doesn't excuse her behavior, but it makes it just the smallest bit more understandable. Think of the lengths that many of us would go to protect our children, hopefully not murder, but we would do what it took to a certain extent. And since we're talking about parents, what was going on with Herod exactly? His behavior is not very consistent. He respects John, regards him as a holy man, and he locks him up. He knows that Herodias hates John, but he doesn't reassure her that she has nothing to worry about, or safeguard John so much that there's no way he can be within her reach. And that doesn't even address this incredible, irresponsible oath. A solemn oath to a teen or preteen girl, sworn in front of his entire court, promising her up to half his kingdom. Who does that? What was he thinking? Well, taking a look at Herod, neither his own family life nor the political world that surrounded him were what you might call stable. His father, Herod the Great, executed 2 of his sons, this Herod's brothers, because he suspected them of treason. The Roman Empire stepped in and executed another one of this Herod's brothers on charges of conspiring to murder their father. Colorful. And when Herod the Great died, the Roman Empire stepped in yet again, carved up his kingdom into 3 parts, and gave a portion of it to Herod, which he assumed the rule of as tetrarch. So he wasn't even really a king, he was kind of a shared king. And more importantly, he's a client of Rome. He's a puppet king. So with that in the background, and with that family history, maybe his decision makers aren't the best, especially when it comes to making oaths. In that world, oath making and oath taking was a very, very serious deal. According to Deuteronomy, Numbers, and Ecclesiastes, to break an oath was a sin. And for a high-ranking person, the stakes were that much higher. A high-ranking person who broke an oath, it would have an immediate impact on his public persona. He would lose trust. He would lose face. And it might open the door for other powerful people who wanted what he had to ask if he should be in charge at all. And it's not as if the Romans were that attached to Herod in particular. One son of Herod the Great, or a nephew, or a cousin, or some other relative, to them was as good as another. They just wanted someone in that seat to calm the people and to keep the peace. It really didn't matter who. So Herod has his own set of realistic fears, and like his wife, he acts out of them. He chooses to keep his oath, and he orders John's death. Their misuse of power is so striking because it's so reactive. They're both acting out of fear to address a what if, something that hasn't happened yet, something that if they took different actions might never happen at all. And at least in Herod's case, it doesn't work. We see that in that first sentence we heard earlier. John, whom I beheaded, has been raised. He was afraid before, and he's still afraid. Human history has so many examples of using power in this way, it's depressing. From Pharaoh, ordering the slaughter of the infants at the beginning to the Exodus, to the McCarthy Red Scare of our own time. No, nobody was murdered as such, but designed to stamp out communism. Or the forced relocation and deportation of Japanese Americans during the Second World War, following the bombing of Pearl Harbor. And so often this kind of preemptive, preventative power use engenders such profound injustice. And so often it doesn't even work, except possibly in the very short term. So, what are we to do? Is there another way? Fortunately, our answer as Christians is yes. And we can find that in how Jesus responds when he hears the news of John's murder, because his disciples bring that to him in the next chapter. And unlike Herod or Herodias, Jesus is reacting to an actual event. They have murdered his mentor, his cousin, his friend, the person who baptized him and who helped him get started. And how does Jesus respond? How does he use his power? Does he fly into a rage? Does he weep? Does he try to incite a riot or call lightning down on Herod or Herodias? I have to admit, part of me thinks that if he did, they would deserve it. But that's not what he does at all. Instead, he welcomes John's disciples and invites them to go with him to a quiet location where they can eat and rest and mourn. And when the multitudes track him down, as they always seem to, he doesn't dismiss them. He doesn't say, "Go away, I'm grieving." Once again, he feeds them. What an extraordinary response. Today, our world seems to be intent on pushing us to become modern-day versions of Herod and Herodias. And we can look no further than last evening when someone shot at one of the candidates for president in a crowd. We are grateful for the actions of the Secret Service and grateful that it's not worse. But this is deeply troubling, and it seems designed to incite and pile angst and fear and rage on top of an already fraught political landscape. And it's so tempting to descend into a constant state of anxiety, to always be alert, braced for whatever is coming next, and to take whatever power that we have and throw them at our own nightmares, to do anything or everything that we can do to make sure that they never come true. It's an exhausting way to live. And a lot of times our nightmares will come true anyway, no matter what we do. So then what do? We listen to Jesus' invitation to live in a different way. We are invited to do as he did, to respond to what is and what is happening, not fear what may be. We are invited to use our agency, the power that we have as individuals, as communities, in the service of others and for the common good. We are invited to remember that we are God's children, God's servants, and that no matter how powerful or rich or influential or whoever we become, it's only a gift, and that one day we will have to give it all back. Perhaps this paraphrase from a bumper sticker that I saw recently may be helpful. In a world full of Herods and Herodiases, follow Jesus.